All right, so we are ready to go. So welcome to week 1, class 2 of Introduction to Statistics. And what we're going to do today is continue on with getting you ready and into the course. So we're going to get everybody now registered if you haven't already for MyLab and get you into the specific MyLab course. There's going to be a bit of overview if you're new to MyLab so that you know how to use the system and what some of its highlights are. And then we are going to introduce all the new math that you're going to learn in this semester. So there's 2 pieces of new math. One is Summation Notation, and then the other one is Order of Operation, and then that is it. Everything else is stuff that you have seen before. So let's get going with registering everybody for MyLab. So for the MyLab registration, the instructions are actually in Canvas right now, so you can find them in the Canvas files, MyLab student registration handout, and that's where you can kind of just cut and paste a lot of the numbers and codes that you might need. But what you're looking for is that information right there. So go to www.pearson.com/MyLab. That link is also in the modules. So you can access that link through Canvas, through the modules as well. And then the important information is once you go to the OK Register Now, so under Register, select Student, and then go to OK Register Now. The important information is that course ID. So that is a course ID for my specific course in MyLab, and that is what will get you inside so that you're going to the right location. If you have an existing Pearson account, you can use that account. Make sure that you do register under the name that you are registered at IUSB at, because I do need to transfer the grades from the MyLab to Canvas, and your grades will be mismatched, and you might be missing some grades if your names don't match. So whatever name you're registered at IUSB under, please make sure that's what you use for this one. And in terms of access, if you bought an access code from the bookstore, you will now use that to access or to pay for the use of MyLab. If you haven't, you can either buy it using a credit card or through PayPal. And then there's also temporary access that you can have for 2 weeks if for whatever reason you don't have an access code at the moment. So we'll spend a little bit of time, we'll give you a little bit of time right now just to make sure that everybody is ready and good to go. All right, so I see that many of you are well on your way to registering. If you still need the code, there it is for this class. But just to kind of make sure that you're aware of some of the features of MyLab, first off, you can access this site through Canvas. So Canvas has in the modules, MyLab Statistics. To access MyLab, click here, and that'll take you straight through to the Pearson site, so you can access it wholesale through Canvas. Once you're there, you're going to learn about this in the first homework assignment, the MyStatLab tutorial. But once you're there, it's basically laid out. This is your one-stop resource for everything. So your textbook can be accessed through this. There's a menu. There should be a menu on the side that will allow you to access different aspects of the course. But on your home screen, thank you, on your home screen of vital importance is this little calendar here, which will indicate when assignments are due. So for example, you have 2 assignments due on Monday the 20th, you got 2 assignments due on Wednesday the 22nd. And all of those, you can see right here, they're also duplicated in these current assignments coming up. All of those are due at 11:59 p.m. So they're due, every assignment is going to be due midnight the day before we either meet for a class or for an exam. So make sure that you are well aware of how to use the calendar and how to use MyLab in and of itself. And actually, your first homework assignment that you're going to be doing through MyLab is learning to use MyLab. So there is a MyLab tutorial that'll kind of take you through how to work a homework assignment, how to enter your data, and all those sort of aspects of it. So that is accessible right now. I'm still populating the assignments for the later part of the course, but you now have all the assignments for the first few weeks available, including this one. And this is due January 20th, so Monday, by 11:59 p.m. So basically, each assignment is going to be due the day before the next class. So that is homework assignment 1A. There is also homework assignment 1B, and this one is one of the few that is not available through MyLab. This is actually available through Canvas. So there will occasionally be homework assignments that are available through Canvas. Your exams will be done via Canvas. So those ones will be labeled, and again in the syllabus are labeled with Canvas. So if you see, once again, just homework assignment 1A and nothing is labeled there, those ones are in MyLab. If you see homework assignment number 1B and then it says Canvas, that means that it's accessible in Canvas. It's in the Canvas. This one is in Canvas quizzes. So make sure that you are aware of those, because you don't want to miss any of the homework assignments because you weren't able to find the correct location. All right, so while people continue to set up or register in for their MyLab, just a few more notes. So in the slides that for today's class, again, they're uploaded into Canvas. There are the features for each type of assignment, the characteristics of each type of assignment that you're going to encounter in MyLab. So in MyLab, you have pre-tests, you have post-tests, and then you have homework assignments. And the criteria for those are a little bit different. So this is for the pre-tests. No, this is for the homework. Yeah, we were talking about homework. This is for the homework. And one big thing to be aware of is that you can continue to work on homework problems after the due date. So if you were not able to finish your homework on time, you can continue to work on those homework questions, but you will be deducted 20% from your score, but only on questions that are scored after the due date. So it's only on your incomplete questions. So if you complete 50% of an assignment, you get 100% of the grades that you've earned for that first 50%, but anything you complete afterwards, be aware that there is that 20% per day penalty. If you use the check answer option, it will indicate and lock all the correct answers. So you can use that to kind of help you as you go through your homework assignment. And again, you can just take a look at this just to see all of the features that your homework assignments will have. On that note as well, in terms of assignments, your first pre-test is going to be coming up due this Monday by midnight. So this is Chapter 1 Pretest 2020. So it's a little bit different than what I put in your syllabus because I had to tweak and update some of these pretests. So that's just to identify them as a new version. So do the Chapter 1 Pretest 2020. Again, that's due Monday by midnight. And these are the features of the pretest. So for the pretest, first thing to notice, I put a little green thing around there. Attempts per assignment. You'll notice that limit the number of attempts is not checked. So you have unlimited attempts for your pretest. So the pretests are, again, a way of getting you ready for the class that we're going to be encountering. It's a way of preparing you that you've encountered the material once. The evidence for the increase in learning outcomes is substantial for pretest. However, it's the first time you're encountering this material. I understand you might not understand it at first. It might not make sense at first. And that's why the number of attempts are unlimited. So if you do your pretest and you're unsatisfied with your grade, give it another shot. If you're still unsatisfied, give it another shot. You can do that as often as you like. For the pretest as well, you do have the save for later option. So you do not have to go through it all at once. You can save your half your pretest for later. Now, I do believe, just as a warning, that you need to complete the question that you're on in order to save it. So I don't think you can save half a completed question. At least that's what I've heard from students in the past. So, but just be aware that you don't have to finish it all in one sitting. You can start it one night, finish it the next night. That's an option that you have for your pretest. And also for your pretest, the quiz summary will show your quiz score and your question results. You can review the quiz at any time after submitting, so you can go back, see what you did incorrectly, see what you can learn from that. And you're allowed to view the feedback while reviewing, so you will get feedback from MyLab. It's another nice feature that they have as well. All right, and then the last sort of public service announcement that I'll give right now, in terms of using MyLab and in terms of navigating this course, we have pre-tests that we're going to be doing, we got homework assignments that we're going to be doing, we got post-tests that we're going to be doing. There's a few moving parts that you need to be aware of, and it's absolutely essential that you know your due dates. So this is an automated system. It will grade your pretest at the time that they are due. It will deduct points from your homework at the moment that it's due. So it is your responsibility in this course to know your due dates. They're on MyLab, they're on your syllabus. I will mention due dates, especially at the beginning of the course in class. So there's 3 sources of places where you can manage these due dates, and it is your responsibility for these. So just to sort of preemptively, bit of a spoiler alert, if you email me or message me and say, oh, I don't know what happened, it just slipped my mind, I missed the pretest, can I have that pretest opened? Unfortunately, the answer is no. The pretest has already been graded, feedback is already available, we cannot reopen those. So it is, again, your responsibility. Know your due dates, stay on top of it, because you do want to, number one, complete these as part of the learning process, and number two, you absolutely do want to maximize your score in this particular course. All right, any questions about MyLab before we move on to the new stuff for today? All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is ninjas. So this is a metaphor that I use. This is a great way to think about what we're doing in this course. And ninjas, as a metaphor, if you've ever watched a ninja movie, if you've ever seen G.I. Joe and you are aware of Snake Eyes, you know that this is the warrior that you send in when everything is lost, when none of your other soldiers were able to tackle this challenge, when you absolutely need somebody that can get the job done, who has unique skills, who is an asset to their team, and really is something that makes a massive, massive impact in any particular team. Ninjas are like that in the military world, and statisticians are like that in psychology. So in psychology, you absolutely need to know statistics. And it is an unfortunate fact that some psychologists know more than others do. And the ones that know statistics, the ones that have a good grasp of statistics, they are like the ninjas of the psychology world. So our ninja here at IUSB would be Dr. Fujita, by far. He's the one where even if I come across a data set and I don't know what to do, I'll be knocking on his door, and sure enough, he will come to our rescue. So that's the kind of goal. We want to get to that point. And this is probably a nice idea of what you thought you were going to be doing when you signed up for this course. So when you signed up for statistical analysis in psychology, you might have had this idea in your head that, oh, I know what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at psychology experiments, and we're going to analyze psychological data, and we're going to get to the heart of how does the mind work, and we're going to learn all these tools about how to figure out which treatment for depression is better, and we're going to find out all these tools about which is the best way to increase self-esteem, and we're going to find all these tools about how memory, how to analyze data on how memory works. We're going to be doing all of this cool stuff that professional psychologists do. And it's true, we are going to get there. We are going to make it to that point. And we are going to get to do all the super cool stuff that you were probably envisioning you would do. All right. We are going to go through this one more time. Let me see. All right, so you were probably thinking that we were going to do something along these lines here. Video unavailable. All right. Not on my watch. All right, so this is a perfect kind of scene to kind of show you the things that we're going to be working towards, the things that we're going to be practicing towards, the things that we're going to try to do. So when you think about ninjas, you probably think about all the sort of cool things that they can do, all the sort of epic battles and fights and jumping off of cliffs and other people chasing them and using their katanas and doing their acrobatics. And we are going to get to this type of stuff. We are going to get to the really cool stuff like that right there. That's going to be T-test when we finally make it. And we're going to be able to do those things. Now make sure you practice. You don't want to be that ninja right there, right? That's not a good ninja to be. But we're going to be getting there. We're going to be doing all the cool stuff. We're going to be doing, measures of central tendency. Make sure you practice. We're going to be doing all the, we're going to be doing ANOVAs. We're going to be doing all the high-flying sort of psychology stuff that you probably thought we were doing to do when you signed up for this. So, why am I showing you this? Well, it's not going to be a huge surprise to you that we are not quite there right now. So, we're going to get here. One sec. We are going to get here. We're going to get here. All right, so we're going to get here eventually, but we're not quite there yet. We're actually at a beginning stage, and that's what I want you to get your mind around. We are at the stage where the Karate Kid was when he first started his martial arts training. So this is your metaphor for the journey that you're on. This is what I want you to think about when you're doing your work. You are starting out at this location, and we just need to make sure that we have our mind right to make the most out of this particular course.
Walk on the road. Walk right side.
All right, so right now, just so if you want to know the story, Daniel, the kid, he is being bullied in his new town, and he got saved by Mr. Miyagi, and now Mr. Miyagi has offered to teach him karate so that he can defend himself. So this is going to be their first lesson. This is the first time Daniel came in. He's like, all right, I'm going to learn karate. And they sat down and talked, and Mr. Miyagi asked him, are you ready? And Daniel said, yeah, I guess so. And this is his answer.
Walk left side. Walk middle. Sooner or later, get the squish just like grape. Here karate, same thing. Either you karate do yes, or karate do no. You karate do guess so. Just like grape.
All right, so that is the first takeaway lesson from this clip. Statistics is a lot like karate, all right? You statistics do yes, you do the practice, you do the homework, you read the text, you come to class, you watch the YouTube videos, you're going to have a successful semester. I have never met a student who has done all those things and did not accomplish the learning goals in this course. You statistics do know, if you decide at the end of this week or in the coming weeks that this is just not the course for you and you decide to drop the course, that's fine as well. You'll take it another time, maybe with another instructor. There's no judgment here. That's absolutely fine. But you statistics do so, it's not going to go well. So do the pretest, commit to the process, go to the study plan, do the practice that's available, practice things over and over again. When you can use Excel, use Excel. Even if it might take you a little bit longer than using your calculator in the beginning stages, use it, because if you do this course you are in for a not so pleasant experience. So either commit to it or don't, but definitely don't think that you can only do part of this and still have the outcome you want. joys of technology. All right, so that is almost right. So I promise to teach statistics. That's my part. You promise to learn statistics. All right, that's your part. The only difference is the no questions asked. All right, ask questions if you have them. That's completely acceptable.
You.
First wash all the car, then wax. Wax. Remember, dear, no question.
Yeah, but I.
Wax on, right hand. Wax off, left hand. Wax on, wax off. Breathe into nose, out the mouth. Wax on, wax off. Don't forget to breathe. Very important. Wax on, wax off. Wax on, wax off.
And where these guys come from?
Wax on. Detroit. Wax off. On. Wax on. Like that. Circle. Wax off. Circle.
All right. So that was the beginning of Daniel's karate training. And much like in this course, it does not look like karate at all. So Daniel came in there and Miyagi had him do this. Things that don't look like karate. And he had him do it over and over and over again. And that's what we're going to be doing in this course, especially at the beginning. All right, you're going to be doing things that don't really feel like the statistics you might have wanted to do. And I'm going to ask you to do it over and over and over and over again. And they're going to be simple little moves, things that you can do. And sometimes the temptation is going to be to try to do them a little bit quicker. Right? So oftentimes, especially in the beginning when people are learning how to use Excel, it's faster to use your calculator. It's actually faster to pull out your phone and just tally things up and calculate averages. But I want you to use Excel. I want you to gain the proficiency in that. I want you to repeat it over and over and over again. So again, we're not going to be doing the cool stuff yet. We're going to be doing some very basic fundamentals. So especially in these first few weeks, we're going to be waxing on and waxing off, learning how to calculate measures of central tendency. We're going to be sanding the floor, learning how to work with frequency distributions. We're going to be painting the fence, a lot of painting the fence, learning how to do with variability, z-scores, probability, setting up all these skills. And again, sometimes you're going to think to yourself, man, I wish I didn't have to paint this fence so much, but it's all in the service of just developing these skills. So as you're working through this course, think about Daniel, think about him waxing all of those cars, and think about it when you're doing. So it's not doing your pretest, it's pretests on, pretests off. It's in-class practice on, in-class practice off, extra practice on, extra practice off, post-tests on, homework on, all of this repetition, doing things over and over and over again. But just know that it is for a reason. And the reason is to get it massively automatic. So this whole time, Miyagi had Daniel waxing on and waxing off. This whole time, he had him sanding the floor. This whole time, he had him painting the fence in a very specific way. And the reason was so that he could get him to this part right here.
Show me wax on, wax off. Yeah! That! 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 Show me head to fence. Head! Face! That! That! Show me side to face. Yes! That! 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 Show me side of floor. Head! Face! Face! Face!
So all that repetition, all that doing it over and over and over again was so that it became automatic, so that Daniel didn't have to think about it, didn't have to devote any cognitive effort to it. And that's going to be what we're going to do in this course. We're going to do things over and over and over again, because later in this course, when we get to hypothesis testing, when we do get to like the cool stuff where we can actually take a look at what psychologists really do when they use statistics. We're going to string all these little moves together. We're going to string all these little skills together. And if you have to think about them, it's not going to turn out well. But if you can get them automatic, it'll be like this. All right, so that is the goal. That's where we're working towards. That's what we want to get to. So once again, we are eventually going to do all the cool stuff, all the interesting stuff, but it is built on a foundation of practice. It is built on a foundation of small fundamental skills that we will be developing. And then what's going to happen is eventually the exam is going to come, or the advanced lab in your major is going to come, and you're not going to have to think about it. You're going to be ready. You're not going to be scared. You're going to kick that exam in the face. You're going to be super happy with your performance in this class. I'm going to be super happy with your performance in this class. It's just going to be a great overall experience for everybody involved. But it begins with the practice. It begins with doing the small fundamental work to make sure that we get to that super cool stuff, which we will at the near the second latter half of this course. But we need to do all that work, all that fundamental stuff first. All right, so talking about fundamental stuff, let's start fundamental stuff. So we are now going to learn the only new piece of math, 2 pieces of math that you're going to need for this course. And just before we get to that, we're going to do a little bit of statistical notation. So statistics, much like mathematics, uses notation. It uses symbols for instructions, for moves, so that you know exactly what it is that you need to do. And many of these come from math. So many of these many of these notations you've already been using. So addition, subtraction, equals, those types of notations. However, it also has some specialized notation. There are some moves that are done in statistics so often and are so important that they got their own little special symbols so that you can recognize their importance and know what to do. So one of the ones that we're going to encounter today is the symbol for a bunch of scores. Scores on a particular variable. And the symbol for scores on a particular variable is a capital letter, usually capital X. So capital X stands for scores, and it stands for all of the scores. It stands for the set of scores. So for example, if I measured everybody's height in this room, I would have, what do we have here today? We got 11. I would have 11 scores. I could represent all 11 of those scores with the capital X. And I could say X stands for heights, and in this case it stands for 11 heights. If I measured, looked up the GPAs of every student here at IUSB, I could use X to stand for the GPAs of every student, single student, stand for all of those scores. So that X can stand for 2 scores, 3 scores, it can stand for 100 scores, it can stand for 100,000 scores. It stands for all the scores, all the numbers that you measured on a particular variable. Now this is going to be the first time that I'm going to mention this particular tip, but it's not going to be the last time. When you see statistical notation, part of that practice, part of that wax on, wax off practice, is to never just name never call it by the symbol, call it by what the symbol stands for. So you are doing yourself a disservice if when you come across this symbol, you say X. That's going to train your brain into thinking that that's an X, and it's not an X. Not really. It stands for the scores. So when you're reading your textbook, when you're reading your homework, when I go through these lecture slides, I will not call this by the symbol. I'm going to usually call it by what it stands for, other than when I'm introducing it. So whenever you see this, call it the scores, because if you train your brain in that way, anytime you see that capital X, you're going to think the scores. And it's just one less thing that your mind has to do in order to translate, oh wait, what did X stand for? Let me look that up in my textbook, I can't quite remember. That's not what you want. You want it to be automatic. You want to see that X and go, oh, the scores. And that is done through that repetition of practice. So X stands for all of the scores. We'll read it as the scores. And then the other special notation that we're going to learn today, and this is your first new piece of mathematics, is how to sum. The symbol for summation. The symbol for adding stuff together. So adding stuff together, adding all the stuff together, is something that happens in statistics over and over and over again. It's one of the fundamental moves that people use when they're trying to understand the scores. So it's so fundamental that it gets its own symbol. It gets the Greek letter sigma. So once again, do not read that as the symbol's name. Do not read that as sigma. Read that as the sum of. Every single time you see that sigma symbol, I want you either in your head or out loud, I don't know how you read, but however you do, read it as the sum of. Because if you get into that practice, if you read capital X as the scores and you read sigma as the sum of, when you see something like this, your brain will immediately read that as the sum of the scores. And our human minds understand what the sum of the scores means. It means you take the scores and you add them all up. You want the sum of the scores. What our brain doesn't understand is sigma x. So if you went to a person on the street and showed them a bunch of scores and said, can you calculate sigma x? That person will probably look at you with a blank face and say, I have no idea what you want. But if you show them scores and say, can you calculate the sum of the scores? They'll be like, yeah, I can do that. I know what that means. So do yourself that favor. Get into that practice. Read this as the sum of the scores. All right, so that's your first new piece of math. Sigma means the sum of. We are now going to go into your second and last new piece of math, and that is the order of mathematical operations. So we have this new way of adding scores together. We have this new way of summing the scores, and now we need to know where does it fit into your order of operations. So order of operations is a convention that mathematicians have decided upon, which lets us know how to read a formula in the correct order. We now have a new piece of math, and we need to know where do we put it in that order. So the order of operations starts off with parentheses. You do whatever is in parentheses first. You then follow it by exponents. You do whatever has an exponent on it second. You then do any multiplying or dividing, and very importantly, from left to right. So you start at the left and you just multiply and divide as you encounter numbers from left to right. And then, and this is the change, and then you do summation with a sigma sign. So sigma is like addition. It is literally addition. Sigma is literally add up all the scores, but it is special. It gets its own symbol. It's kind of like VIP addition. So it gets to go first. So make sure that you give it the special attention that it deserves. It gets to go first. So you do all your summation that has a sigma sign in front of it, and then you do any addition and subtraction, and once again you do that from left to right. So let's take a look at what that would mean, and then we're going to do some in-class follow-along practice. So if you have an equation like this, if you want to be able to read this equation correctly, you got to follow the convention. Just like in reading English, you read it in a certain way. We go left to right, top to bottom. That's how we know it'll make sense. In mathematics, we need to do it a certain way in order for it to make sense. We need to use those order of operations. So when you encounter a formula like this, what you need to do is the first thing you need to do is you need to do whatever is in parentheses. So what's in parentheses is the scores minus 1. So when you read the scores minus 1, what that means is for every single score, you take 1 away from it. So if anything is ever done to the scores, if anything is ever done to this capital X here that stands for the scores, what that means is you do this to every single score in there. So the scores minus 1 means that you take every single score that is in that X symbol and you take 1 away from it. So if that X has 1,000 scores, you're going to take 1 away from each of those 1,000 scores. So first we do what's in parentheses. So we would take 1 away from each of the scores. Then what we do is we do exponents. So we got an exponent right there. So in this case, whatever our scores were transformed into as a result of what we did here in the parentheses, those new scores, those scores minus 1, whatever we ended up with, those would now each be squared. So if we started with 1,000 scores and we took 1 away from 1,000 scores, we would now square those new scores, those new 1 minus scores. We would square each and every single one of them. Next thing after that, down the line, we do multiplying and dividing. We do it from left to right. So now we take the scores that we just created, the ones that we just squared, and we divide each of them by 7. And once we're done dividing each of those by 7, we multiply each of those, each of the new scores, the divided by 7 scores, we multiply each of those by 2. So the step that you're working on always builds upon whatever happened in the last step. Right? The step that you come up to next always works on whatever your scores are at that particular moment. Once we're done that, once we're done the multiplying and dividing from left to right, then we are ready for summation with the sigma sign. And summation with the sigma sign, again, it's special, it's addition, but it's VIP addition. So we do that before any other addition and subtraction. And in that case, we take whatever the scores have become after all of this mathematical manipulation, and we add them all up. So when you do your summation, when you use that sigma symbol to do your summation, you're going to go from 1,000 scores, 1,000 numbers, to 1. The summation takes all of your scores and just smooshes them all together, adds them all up, so you have 1 number. So that's the move where you go from a bunch of numbers, a bunch of scores, down to 1 number after the summation. So we sum up all our scores, we get 1 big number, and then finally, after all that, we're ready to do a little bit of addition and subtraction, and we take this 1 and we subtract it from that 1 big number that we ended up with after the summation. And just as a kind of spoiler alert for this course, because of the way that our universe works, just because of the way, and this is like a fundamental thing in our universe, the way that our universe is built, you will be amazed how often -1 comes up. I have seen it in stats, I have seen it in computer programming, I have seen it in countless scientific applications. For some reason, our universe has -1 as something that's built into it. So you are going to see a lot of -1s in statistics, so we better get used to dealing with -1s. And also, spoiler alert, this is by far the biggest error that students make in this order of operations. The biggest error is to do subtraction or addition before the summation. Remember that summation gets special VIP treatment, it gets to go first. All right, so enough seeing it, let's actually start doing it. Let's actually start getting in a little bit of this practice. So for this practice, what you're looking for, we're going to do some in-class together practice first, just to kind of show you some of the skills that you need for Excel. And then afterwards, we'll have time and you'll have an opportunity to do some solo practice. But what you're looking for is you're looking for the Excel sheet. It can be found in Canvas, in Files. You'll see a folder called Excel Sheets. And the one that you are looking for is this Excel sheet right here. So this is the Excel sheet that you're looking for, and this is what we're going to be working on for the remainder of class today. So while you're opening that up, again, it can be found in Canvas in the files. In files, there's a folder called Excel Sheets. This is week W01C2, so that's week 1, class 2. This is practice. There's a second sheet in there for extra practice, but we're just going to work on the practice one to begin today. All right. So to start off with, we are going to start up on question number 1. And in this case, we have 3 variables. So we have 12 participants here. What that means is that this might be a psychology experiment where we measured 12 subjects. So we had 12 participants, and we measured their scores on 3 different variables. And we coded that with our symbols as an X, Y, and a Z score. So it could have been that we measured their mathematical ability, and we decided to call that our X variable. And then we measured their athletic ability, and we called that the Y variable. And then we measured their artistic ability, and we called that the Z variable. So we measured 3 different things about these subjects, and notice that the X scores are 12 scores. So X in this case stands for 12 scores. So on this sheet here, what we want to do is in these yellow answer cells, we want to put the correct answer for, in this case, the sum of the X scores. So how do we do that? We need to add up all of the X scores. Now this is the first time where you could probably do this. You already have the skills to do this. You already know how to do this. You could probably pull out your phone and pretty quickly add up all of those X scores. What we want to do in this class is we want to get into the practice of developing new skills, and in this case we're going to develop Excel skills. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to learn a new function. How do we sum all of the scores? And the answer to that is the sum function. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to this cell right there, the one that is right next to the sum of symbol, and we are going to put in the equals. We're going to type in equals. What equals does is it lets Excel know that you are about to give it a function. You're about to tell it to do some sort of calculation. Next thing it wants to know is what function do you want to give it? And the function we're going to use is called sum, S-U-M. So we are going to use the summation function. Put that up here. All right, we're going to use the summation function. And one of the real nice things about Excel is that when you start typing in a function, it'll actually start trying to guess what function it is that you're looking for. And it'll give you a list. And the super, super nice thing about that, not only does it give you a list, but it'll also tell you what these functions do. So if you click on it, it'll give you a brief description. So in this case, the sum function adds all the numbers in a range of cells. Well, that sounds exactly like what we want to do. So we can either double click it or just enter in sum, and that will give us that particular function. Now, once you have equals sum, the next thing you need to do is you need to open the parentheses. Opening parentheses is the way to tell Excel you're about to give it some numbers. You're about to give it a range of cells. So we open up the parentheses, and then the last thing we need to do is we need to highlight all of the cells that we're going to use. And you can either do this with your mouse and you just drag and highlight the, click and drag to highlight the cells that you want. You can also do it using the arrow keys and the shift function. There's a number of different ways to do this in Excel, and I encourage you to find the one that works best for you. Students like to do, people like to do, it in different ways. Whatever works best for you, feel free to do that. So we put in equal sum, we highlight the numbers, we close our parentheses, we hit enter, and we have calculated the sum of the X scores. Everybody good so far? All right, so now the last thing that we need to do for this first question here is we need to get that answer, that 518, that sum of the scores, up into the yellow answer sheet. All right, so we want to get, the yellow answer cell. So we want to put it up into this cell. And the temptation is to just enter it in manually. And there is two reasons why you do not want to do this. All right? Sometimes it's going to be correct. If you scroll down, you'll see the answer cells underneath here that will indicate whether or not you got answers correct or not. And in this case, 518, that is correct. However, that does two things that we do not want to get into a habit of doing. Two things that are very, very dangerous. The first thing is that this opens you up to error, to human error. It opens you up to the possibility of entering in the wrong number. And I know you might be sitting there thinking, well, it's pretty simple to enter in a number. I'm not going to make that mistake. And I have seen it on exam after exam after exam. And if you're in a high pressure situation, you can start making mistakes. So I have seen students calculate things correctly and then enter in 581 instead of 518. That's a very human error. Unfortunately, we cannot afford those human errors. We deal with psychology. We deal with people's lives. We deal with treating people with mental illnesses, depression. We might be calculating prescription drugs. We might be presenting information, scientific information that will change the education system. And we cannot harm people with the excuse that, well, I was close. I mean, I know how to do it, but I got the wrong answer. So in this course, just so that you know, the right answer, the final right answer is absolutely everything. We need to make sure we have that final right answer because of the importance of the work that we're doing. And one way to make sure that we do that is to not introduce human error. The other reason that you don't want to do that is because occasionally Excel will only display a certain number of significant digits. It'll only display a certain amount of the number. It will not display all of the decimal places. And if you only carry through in your equations, in your multi-step problem solving, if you keep rounding off as you go through, you introduce rounding error. And that can snowball over time so that you end up with an answer that is completely different than the correct answer would have been if you could have carried all the decimals. So for those two reasons, what we're going to do in this course is we're not going to enter these things manually. We're going to use the equals function. So when you're entering your answers into your yellow cells, type in equals, go to the cell, type in equals, and then highlight where your answer is and hit enter. And then you can scroll down and you can see that we have the sum of the X scores all correct. All right, so let's do this two more times for the sum of the Y scores and the sum of the Z scores. All right, so once again, we go equals, sum, open parentheses, that indicates that you're going to be giving Excel the scores, highlight the Y scores, close those parentheses, hit enter. We have a sum of 678 for the Y scores. We want to pop that into our answer cell for this question with the equals function. We hit equals, we highlight where the answer is, hit enter, and then we scroll down and we see that we have the sum of the Y scores correct. Last one, sum of the Z scores. We go equal, sum, open parentheses, highlight those Z scores, close those parentheses, hit enter. We have a sum of 716. Pop that into our answer cell using the equals function, and we scroll on down, and we have all of question number 1 correct. All right, has everybody got those numbers for question number 1 working so far? Okay, on to question number 2. So for question number 2 here, we're going to start getting into some of these order of operation issues. And we're going to do these 4 questions here. So now we're only dealing with the X scores. We only have one set of scores. And now we want to figure out these multi-step order of operation type equations. So let's start off with this top one up here. So the top one, we need to do the sum of, and then in parentheses, the scores minus 1. So in this case, we need to go back to our order of operations, and we need to ask ourselves, what's the first thing that we need to do? So if we go to the order of operations, here, just bring that slide up real quick. If we go to the order of operations right there, we can see that the very first thing is parentheses. That is literally the first thing we need to do. So we look for parentheses, and lo and behold, there it is. So the way that we can do this is we're going to use this column to calculate what we need to in the parentheses. So we're going to label it the scores -1, just so that for our human brain we can remember what it is that we were doing. And then once again, this is an example of the type of practice that I'm going to be talking about. I have complete faith in everybody in here that you can take 1 away from a number. I have complete faith that you can do -1 in your mind. And there's going to be a temptation to be like, well, I can do this, 55, 34, that's a 70, that's an 89. 2 reasons why you don't want to do that. Number one, I have seen people do this as well, and they'll be like, that's 14, that's 54, that's 22. You'll make an error. It's easy. It's just easy, especially when you're under pressure. You don't want to open yourself up to that. The second thing is that that's not practicing the skills that you need, especially if you have 1,000 scores that you want to take one away from. You're not using Excel the way that it was meant to be used. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a function. We're going to put in equals, let Excel know that we're going to do a function. We're going to highlight where the score is, and then we're going to just type in -1. And we are literally saying, do the score -1, and you can see that Excel did that for us. So once again, equals, highlight the cell that has the score, type in -1, and you hit enter and it'll calculate that for you. Equals, highlight the score, type in -1, and it'll do that for you. And you might think to yourself, well, this is not much faster than just doing it, on your own manually. But it can be. I'm not going to show you that today. We're going to save that for next week, but eventually I will show you how to do it super quick once you have it all set up right now. But right now we are at the stage of wax on and wax off, so we do need a little bit of that repetition. So if you want to fill in the rest of that, and I'll give you a couple of minutes, or not a couple of minutes, I'll give you a little bit of time to get that done. All right, so I can hear a decrease in the typing sounds around the room. I'm going to take that as a sign that most of us are ready to go. All right, so we've done the parentheses. We take a look at our equation, and there is no exponents. There's no multiplying or dividing, so we go to step 4, summation with the summation symbol, and lo and behold, there it is, that summation symbol. So what we do now is we sum whatever's in front of that summation symbol, and in this case, it is the scores -1. So these are the scores -1. That is what we need to sum. So now we can use that formula, equals sum, and we highlight the scores -1. We hit enter, and we see that the sum of the scores -1, in this case, is 506, and we pop that into our answer cell, and we scroll on down, and we can see that in the automatically updating green grading cells, we have that one correct. All right, next one. we have the sum of the scores squared. So once again, multi-step problem. Once again, go to your order of operations. We have no parentheses, so we go by step 1. Next one, exponents. We have exponents, so we have the scores squared. So once again, we're going to put a column. Once again, get in the habit of labeling your columns, because you might think you'll remember what it was that you were doing, but your brain and your mind will disagree often. So make sure that you have enough there so that you can, it'll jog your memory. So you can just put in X, SQRD. That's good enough for me to remember, all right, these are the scores squared. And then what we're going to do is we are going to put in the equals function once again. We're going to highlight the original score. So we're starting on a new formula. We're not dealing with the scores minus 1 anymore. We're going back to the original scores. That's what the question is asking for. And this time we're going to square them. And the shortcut for squaring in Excel, there's a couple of different ways to do it. But that little hat, that shift 6, so that's on the 6 key. If you hit shift, you'll get that symbol. That is a symbol for exponents. That lets Excel know that you are about to give it an exponent, and then you just simply tell it what exponent you're going to give it, which is 2 for squared. You hit enter, and you see that 56 squared equals 3,136. So once again, equals, highlight the original score, shift 6 for the exponent symbol, let Excel know what exponent you're raising it to. In this case, it's squared. And you hit enter, and we have 35 squared. And then one more time for 71 squared. Highlight the original score. Shift 6 for the exponent. 2 is the exponent that we're raising it to. So the shift 6 lets Excel know that it can expect an exponent. And then you let it know what the exponent is. We hit enter, and we find out that 71 squared is 5,041. And I'll let you fill in the rest of those. But rest assured, we will learn how to do it a little bit quicker. All right, I can hear a little bit of a lull in the keys being pressed, so I think this might be a good time to go on to the next step. So we were dealing with that equation right there. We did the exponents. Next thing we do is multiplying and dividing. There is no multiplying and dividing. Next thing we do is summation with the sigma symbol, and we do have that. So we want to sum these scores squared. So once again, we use the summation function, so equals sum, open those parentheses, and now we highlight all of our squared scores. Close those parentheses, hit enter, and we see that the sum of the squares is usually going to be a huge number, but we're going to pop that into our answer cell using the equals function, and we scroll on down, and we see that we have the sum of the scores correct. All right, next one. We have the sum of 2 times the scores. So this one, again, always go until you get into, absolutely master it. Go to that list of order of operations. We do parentheses first. We have no parentheses. We do exponents next. We got no exponents. We do multiplying and dividing left to right. We got multiplication. 2x is 2 times the scores is multiplication. So we're going to put a new column here, and we're going to just label it 2x for 2 times the scores. In this case, we're once again going to take the scores. So once again, we're dealing with our original set of scores, none of the previously changed, transformed scores. We're going back to those original scores, and we're going to multiply it, and the multiplication symbol in Excel is the asterisk. So Shift 8 is where you can find that on your keyboard. So the asterisk is for multiplication. That indicates we're going to multiply this score by something, and then we just have to tell Excel what that something is. In this case, it's 2. And we find out that 56 times 2 is 112. So once again, equals, highlight your original score. This is also why you want to label your columns so that you remember what each column is. Shift 8 for the asterisk, 2 for multiplying it by 2. And we find out that 35 times 2 equals 70. And then once again, highlight your score, Shift 8 for the asterisk, and 2, that is to multiply it by 2, hit equals, and we find out that 71 times 2 is 142. But again, we're working for this so that we can get it automatic, and 2, so that we can take advantage of all the things that Excel can do. All right, and there's that familiar lull, which lets me know it's time to move on. All right, so we had the sum of 2 times the scores. We just did the multiplication. The next step is to do any summation with the sigma sign. So we have that summation right there. We want the sum of 2 times the scores. So once again, we go to our formula for summation. We go equals sum, open parentheses, highlight those 2 times the scores, close your parentheses, hit enter, and then we get a score. We get a sum of 1036. Pop that into your answer cell using the equals function. Scroll on down, and you see that we got that one correct. All right, last one in this in-class demo. So for this one, we have the sum of the scores minus 1. And this one is included here very deliberately, and I will give you a warning that this type of question is the one where order of operation mistakes are made the most. For some reason, it's probably because of the similarity of summation and addition, students tend to do it in the incorrect order. So this is by far where the mistakes are made. This one is the sum of the scores minus 1. So we take a look at it and we go through the order of operations. We do anything in parentheses. There's no parentheses. We do anything with exponents. There's no exponents. We do anything with multiplying and dividing left to right. There's no multiplying and dividing. We do anything with summation. There is summation, and it needs to be done first. So in this case, we're going to do the summation first. We want the sum of x. So we go down here, and we're going to put in that equals sum, highlight all of those scores, hit enter, and we see that we have a sum of the scores of 518. Then what we want to do is we want to complete the formula by taking 1 away from the sum of x. So that's the sum of x, 518. So we need to take 1 away from that. And if you have just like a single step that you need to do, you can calculate that in the answer cells. So we're going to use Excel to do this. So we're going to put in equals. We're going to highlight our answer of the sum of the scores. And then just in the answer cell, we can take 1 away. So we minus 1 from that. We hit enter, and we see that we have 517, and we see that that is correct. And notice that the sum of the scores minus 1 without parentheses is a lot different than the sum of the scores minus 1 with parentheses. So that's why order of operations is important. Those two are very, very different, very, very different answers. All right, so we'll leave the rest of the questions as practice, independent practice. So question number 3 here, this is, I'll admit, a little bit of overkill for this stage of the course, but this is a great way to kind of test where you're at. So if you can do question number 3, if you can get to that correct answer for question number 3, you are well placed to move on to the next step. If you can't, it is a little bit of overkill, so just give it a shot, try a little bit of practice. And then we have question number 4 here, which starts dealing with multiple scores. And just one thing I want you to know about this question, if you ever see the symbols for 2 sets of scores right next to each other, that means you multiply the scores together. So when you see X and Y right next to each other, that means for every single score, you want to take the X score and you want to multiply it by the Y score. That's what that symbol there means. So same thing with division. You want to do that for every single score. So try those 5 questions. Like I said, question 3, 4, and 5, a little bit overkill, but it's a nice little challenge for yourself to kind of gauge where you are in this course. So we're going to wrap up our time here together. We don't have very much time left, so just a few more things I want to say. So you do have this practice sheet that you can finish to get that practice in on order of operations. There is also another practice sheet. So this is in no way homework. This is in no way going to be submitted. It's automatically graded. You can scroll beneath each question to see which ones you got correct, which ones you did not get correct yet. But that's extra practice there as well. And then we do have, just so that we have a pretest coming up. If you struggle on the pretest, make sure that you do go through the pretest. Go through it, go through the struggle. But if you don't get a good grade on your pretest, then you can always get 100% on that pretest by finishing the MyLab study plan. And that is the Quiz Me option, and that's where you can earn mastery points. So if you go to the study plan and you go to the Quiz Me options over here, and again, the tutorial should help you navigate and see where to find those. Each of these chapters have Quiz Me options that allow you to show mastery of the concepts. And your mastery is going to be measured here. And if you earn 100% of your mastery points, or whatever you get on your mastery points, I will replace your pretest score with those mastery points. So if you really struggle on a pretest and you only get 20% on a pretest, but you go through the study plan and you complete the mastery points and you get 100% of the mastery points, I will change your 20% to 100%. So this is your backup plan. Definitely do the pretest, go through the procedure, but just know that you have this backup plan. So don't feel anxious about your grade. You can still get 100%. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. And then the last thing that I want to point out is that I introduced, this wasn't on the syllabus, but I just want to make sure everybody's aware of this. Just in case you're thinking that you might benefit from a little bit of a refresher in some of the math. I said this wasn't a math course, but we are going to use math concepts. We saw some of them here. So just in case you think you might need a little bit of a refresher, there are practice assignments available in MyLab, which are these math review. So you can do math review on basic things of modeling, like how does a variable work, basic things in operations and expressions, like what we've been doing today, graphing linear equations, simple expressions and solving equations, linear functions and linear inequalities, and then exponential and rational functions. So this is not something that you need to complete, but again, if you're kind of feeling a little bit iffy maybe on your math skills, or you just want to kind of shake the dust off and find a place where you can kind of get in a little bit of practice, definitely use these. They are practice, they do not impact your grade whatsoever, so go in there and suck if you need to until you get better, but just know that that is an available resource. All right, and that is it for today. So next class, remember, get into MyLab, make sure that you're doing the pre-test, make sure that you're completing the first 2 homework assignments. One's in Canvas, one's in MyLab, and other than that, we are done for today.